I wonder if we're gonna have enough.
That means it's outside, so it's safe. You know, you shouldn't get sick.
Unless the landscape.
Yeah, leave it up. I don't think it makes any difference. And it's sort of nice to look out the window. You know, it's good. It's good, right, to have something to look at. I mean, it's good enough. We can see. 40 seconds. Wait, why? Just traffic? What day of the week was it? Wow. So 37, you know, get it. Then 37. I mean, 37 can be a mess too.
Okay, we want to get going.
Wow.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm calling to order the special meeting of the Ross-Town Council for Thursday, May 31st, 2023. Has the agenda been posted?
Yes, sir.
Okay, this is the time, open time for public expression on matters not on the agenda. Is there any member of the public here in the room who would speak for public? Seeing none, is there anyone?
There are no raised hands on Zoom, sir.
Mayor, is your microphone on? Is your Mayor, is your microphone on? Okay.
We can move it closer.
Oh,
Now it's on.
I
So
had a
it looks
small-
like the light is on, but then
okay, now it's actually on. There appearing to be no one who wishes to speak, in the public who wishes to speak. We'll move on to item 4, which is a certification of the final environmental impact report and amendments to the Town of Ross General Plan to adopt a new housing element. It's my understanding, Andrew, that you're going to provide us a report. We're going to do this separately or one at a time, so we'll start with the environmental impact report. Will you please bring us up to date on that?
Mr. Mayor, I just wanted to first thank the members, the mayor and the members of the council for taking time in your schedules to have a special meeting tonight on this important topic. We have here this evening Rebecca Markwick, our planning and building director, and the town's consultant, Andrew Hill, with the firm Diet and Batia, will be giving a presentation to the council. And I'm just going to turn it on over.
time. So the Ross housing element outlines a plan that would allow for development of up to 135 new housing units incrementally over the next 8 years to help the town comply with its RHNA obligations. Build out of the inventory would primarily involve construction of smaller scale housing such as accessory dwelling units throughout the community, but would also involve construction of some multifamily units at the Branson School and at the Civic Center. It was determined that build out of the inventory could result in one or more significant environmental impacts, and so the decision was made to prepare an environmental impact report. The town has complied with the requirements of the California Environmental Quality Act in preparing the EIR, and tonight the council is being asked to consider certification of the EIR. So in my presentation tonight, I'll cover the purpose and objectives of an EIR, some of the legal requirements, and the environmental review process associated with it. I'll provide an overview of the findings of the draft EIR and a summary of public comments received, and then I'll go over the contents of the final EIR with you. So an environmental impact report is a document prepared pursuant to the requirements of the California Environmental Quality Act. And that document informs the public and decision makers of significant environmental effects of proposed plans. It identifies ways to minimize those effects, and it describes reasonable alternatives to the project. The Town of Ross Housing Element EIR is a programmatic document. That means that it evaluates the broad policy direction of a planning document, but not the site-specific impacts of individual projects subsequent to the housing element. Full details of the subsequent projects can't be known at this time, and therefore can't be analyzed in a programmatic EIR. And that means that subsequent projects may require project-level environmental review to the extent that they have site-specific impacts that aren't analyzed in the programmatic EIR. By law, the EIR must address a full range of impacts under a broad range of environmental topics. Everything you see on the screen here, from aesthetics, visual resources, and air quality, to biological resources, cultural resources, through to geology, hazardous materials, noise, transportation, wildfire, and other impacts. At the end of last year, an initial study was prepared that identified potential environmental impacts from the project related to 7 topics. That are shown here: biological resources, cultural, tribal, and historic resources, GHG emissions, geology and seismicity, noise, vibration, transportation, and wildfire. Based on a careful analysis, it was determined that impacts related to the other topics would be less than significant, and therefore the EIR focused on these topics in particular, providing a detailed analysis and recommending mitigation measures to address associated impacts. This is a snapshot of the EIR process. It began back in November of 2022, when the town released a notice of preparation, letting community members and public agencies know that an EIR would be prepared for the project. The initial study that I mentioned was circulated with that NOP, and people were invited to comment on the scope and the content of the EIR. A scoping meeting was held before the town council as well to hear public comment. Following the close of that 30-day scoping period, we prepared a draft EIR and released that for a legally required 45-day comment period. And then following the close of that 45-day comment period, staff and consultants prepared the final EIR addressing all of the public comments that were received. And that brings us to the hearing tonight, where the council is going to consider certification of the EIR. Overall, the draft EIR found that impacts related to the majority of those resource categories would be less than significant. The draft EIR identified 12 potential impacts, all of which could be reduced to a less than significant level with mitigation. And those impacts were related to biological resources, cultural and tribal resources, geology, soils, seismicity, greenhouse gas emissions, noise, vibration, and wildfire. However, even after the implementation of all feasible mitigation, the EIR found that impacts related to GHG emissions and transportation would still remain significant and unavoidable. This is not unusual for a long-range plan like a housing element, which considers full build-out of the site's inventory by 2031. However, the town can still approve the project with a statement of overriding considerations that finds that the benefits of the projects outweigh the adverse consequences. And in this case, the benefits of the project would be compliance with state law and housing production to meet local needs. So the first significant impact relates to vehicle miles traveled. Build out of the site's inventory would generally involve smaller scale housing, which has a lower trip generation rate, and a lot of that new housing would be on the valley floor, centrally located, which means shorter trips. And as a result of that, the per capita VMT would be reduced over current conditions by about 12%, which is positive. However, the threshold of significance is a 15% reduction over existing conditions. And so it's a little short of that threshold. The EIR introduced mitigation to address that impact. That mitigation involves the provision of 2 bicycles at the Civic Center for the use of the future residents of the housing at the Civic Center and town employees for short trips in and around Ross as a way of reducing vehicle miles traveled. However, even with implementation of that mitigation measure, we're still not likely to get to that 15% reduction threshold, and so the impact remains significant and unavoidable. The second significant and unavoidable impact is also linked to VMT, and in this case, because the project would not result in that 15% reduction in VMT, it also means that that there would be an impact related to GHG emissions. Because there's no mitigation available to reduce the VMT impact further, there's also no mitigation available to reduce GHG emissions from mobile sources as well. And so that impact is linked, and it would also remain significant and unavoidable. And so the draft EIR was available for public comment from the middle of March to the beginning of May. During that 45-day period, the town received 1 comment letter, and that comment letter highlighted the potential impacts of housing development on the Berg site, and the letter specifically emphasized the need for a site-specific environmental review if and when housing is proposed on that site. Responses, that comment letter and responses to it are included in the final EIR, which is in your packet tonight. Overall, the final EIR has 4 main components. It includes an introductory chapter that discusses the uses and the organization of the final EIR. It includes the letter that was received and responses to that letter. And it also includes an errata sheet that includes some minor corrections and clarifications that were made to the draft EIR. And then the draft EIR itself is incorporated by reference into the final EIR. Along with the final EIR, we've also prepared a mitigation monitoring and reporting program. This is essentially a checklist to ensure that the mitigation measures are implemented. It outlines a method of verification, timing of verification, and the responsibility, and that will be part of the implementation of the EIR. And so with that, I'll pause there to see if you have any questions.
Does any member of the council have a question?
I have a quick question. For the mitigation for the vehicle miles traveled, it says that, let's see, multi-family housing development on the Civic Center site shall be required to provide at least 2 bicycles. So that means that it's the developer and not the town. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Does any other, yes, Julie?
Is that in perpetuity, or is there a limit for how long the developer has to provide those bicycles?
Yes, I think basically it means in perpetuity. However, I suppose if the town does another climate action plan and through that process identifies other ways to reduce VMT below the 15% threshold, then it might no longer be needed. But in theory, it should be perpetuity.
And it's 2 bikes for all 9 units. It's not 2 bikes per unit.
Correct, 2 total bikes.
Great.
Does anyone else on the council have any questions about the EIR?
I do.
Go ahead.
I noticed a couple, and maybe I'm just reading it wrong because there's so many attachments and exhibits and, in attachment 1 on page 1 in the intro, number 2 lists exhibit B as the mitigation monitoring and reporting program, but I think it should actually be exhibit C. And the same on page 5. And then I have one last comment, which is on page 24 under number 32. Under alternatives, it lists 12 units at the Civic Center, and it uses the word historic. It says the historic town hall and firehouse would be preserved on site. And that's just a hypothetical alternative, but I'm uncomfortable with the word historic.
So as part of the EIR process, we put in a records request to the Northwest Information Center, which is part of the California Historical Records project. And they informed us that at some point a survey was done, and it was determined that both the town hall and the Civic Center and the public safety building had been determined to be historic. And so we were citing that information. And so that's the source there. I don't know if I think we don't have a copy of the report. And so we could certainly request from the Northwest Information Center a copy of the report so you can understand the context further.
What, I guess, I would love to know what it means if it's historic, what we're limited in terms of development, but that's not really why we're here today. So I'll save that question for later.
Well, I would like a copy, just as a follow-up. Yeah, I think that would be very interesting to see what that is, get more information about that.
Anyone else on the council have any further questions regarding the EIR? If not, what we're going to do is ask Andrew to report on the other half of what we're working on tonight, and then we will open the whole thing up to questions from the public, comment from the public. So Andrew, you want to go ahead?
Okay, yes. And so moving on with the housing element, over the last 14 months, town has worked diligently through a multi-phase process to bring us to today. Working with extensive community input, developed a draft of the housing element, released that for public review, sent it up to the state for their review at the end of last year and the beginning of this year. That the state's 90-day review ended in the middle of March, and since that time, staff and consultants have been working to address the comments that the state provided on the draft housing element that they reviewed. We prepared a red line version that shows clearly what changes have been made to the draft housing element to respond to those comments, as well as a matrix that goes comment by comment and explains how the HCD comments have been addressed in the revisions. On May 11th, we had a study session with the town council to go over those changes and to answer any questions that you might have had at that time. And that brings us to today, where the revised draft housing element is before you for consideration of adoption. So in my presentation tonight, I'd like to introduce the revised draft 6-cycle Ross housing element. And then if appropriate, the council would adopt that housing element and authorize the town manager to send the housing element to HCD for further review and certification. And so quickly, I'll go over a summary of the modifications that have been made to the draft. Based on council direction at the 11th of May meeting, the post office site has been removed from the inventory. And so this is a revised map showing the sites that are now in the housing element. The inventory with the capacity projections has been revised accordingly. One thing to note, a little different than May 11th, is that the number of units on the Berg site has been reduced to 4. This is because in the draft that we reviewed previously, it was 4 units and 2 SB9 units. And HCD had made a comment that that was double counting since we'd done a separate calculation of SB9 units. So we have rectified that. But overall, the inventory maintains the capacity to meet the RHNA obligations at all income levels with a buffer. And so that's what this is showing. Additionally, as we discussed with you on May 11th, the Housing Action Plan contains a number of revisions to programs, generally to add more specificity about milestones and timing. And so all of these program revisions are things that we discussed with you on May 11th. The only thing that's different here is that program 3B, which was formerly about the post office site, has been removed since that site is no longer on the inventory. But the other, the revisions to program 3A, adding more specificity and steps about housing at the Civic Center, 3K, more specificity and steps about housing at Branson, a couple of new programs regarding fair housing, and an omnibus cleanup of the town code to ensure compliance with new state law. All of these things are the same as what we discussed with you on May 11th. Additionally, also as I referenced in May 11th, we've included more information about the viability of accessory dwelling unit construction in Ross, including a map and some additional data has been incorporated into the draft. Similarly, we also incorporated additional analysis about the viability of SB9 housing, including a map that shows the building footprints on the sites to demonstrate that there is adequate access to those sites, and they could be either developed with additional units pursuant to SB9 or split. There would be adequate space. So that information has been incorporated into the draft to respond to HCD questions. As I mentioned again on May 11th, we also introduced a lot of more contextual information about regional fair housing trends into the appendix on fair housing. And we introduced a table of quantified objectives, which demonstrates that Ross will meet its RHNA entirely through new construction, including construction of accessory dwelling units. And so this brings us to the end of our four-phase process. And if appropriate tonight, the council can adopt the housing element. Following adoption, the revised draft will be posted on the town website for 7 days, and then which is a legal requirement. And then following the end of that 7-day period, we'll send the revised draft housing element back to HCD for further review and for certification. And we'll send them a red line version that clearly shows where the edits have been made, together with that matrix that goes comment by comment and responds to them, telling them how we've addressed their comments. And so recommended action for tonight would be to take any clarifying questions from the town council, open the public hearing, adopt a resolution certifying the EIR if appropriate, and adopt the housing element if appropriate.
Does any member of the council have questions regarding the adoption of the amended housing element? Julie?
Just a couple quick questions. At our May 11th meeting, you all were going to talk to HCD about what we had discussed, and I assume that given the changes that were made, they were receptive to our suggested changes.
Yes, it was an informal consultation, so it's not a firm yes. But we had a few questions for them, and they confirmed that we were on the right path.
Great. In the resolution 2310, in the fifth paragraph, it says the town of Ross held 6 public meetings. And I'm wondering if those are just the town council meetings, because I know you all have been meeting with everyone repeatedly. So I'm wondering if maybe there should be a parenthetical that says 6 public town council meetings. And I'm sure if you added up all the other meetings, it would probably be in the 20s.
Yes.
Maybe you want to put that somewhere in the resolution, just to be clear. And then the only other thing that I had was on Appendix C, page C27. There's a paragraph in there that says, as of June 18, 2021, due to insufficient progress toward our above moderate income RENA, we are, quote, subject to the streamlined ministerial approval process, SB 35, for proposed developments with at least 10% affordability. No applications have been received. And I'm hoping that that is an erroneous statement and can be corrected.
Yeah, I can respond to that. I think we were also, so HCD did a determination, a statewide determination for every community in California in June of 2021. And when you actually look at that determination, the full text says these 285 jurisdictions had not made sufficient progress towards their above moderate RENA or had not submitted an annual progress report. And according to town records, the town has made sufficient progress, substantial progress towards all of its RENA at all income categories. And so we think that perhaps at that time, they had not received an annual progress report for the 2020 year. And so we're going to confirm to see if that's true.
And so that paragraph's going to be revised before it's submitted?
We'll certainly want to clarify.
Yeah, it's not a great, it really stood out to me.
Yeah.
Elizabeth, you have a question?
So on the, so this is attachment 2, page 60, where it says program, it had been program 3D, now it's program 3C, prepare a downtown area plan. In the middle of that section, it says, through this program, the town will develop a plan for a special planning area that includes the downtown commercial area, the post office site, and Ross Common. And I wondered, should the post office site be deleted from that, because we don't have that as a site anymore?
Yes, I think it could be removed. The downtown plan doesn't necessarily have to plan for housing in all those areas, because it draws on a plan that's currently in the or a program that's already in an action, I should say. It's an action from the general plan that talks about an area plan that's mostly focused on circulation and streetscape improvements. But I think it could be, the post office reference could be removed.
And then a little farther down, I couldn't quite figure out the arithmetic. It says objectives, it used to say 12 multifamily units constructed in the downtown special planning area, and then the revised is 4. So I know we got rid of the 6 from the post office site, but did we get rid of 2 more? What were those 2? How did we get down to 4?
Well, the 4 that are remaining are on, I think it's 27
Okay.
Ross Common,
Okay.
and that's all that's remaining.
Okay, okay. And then, I don't think it's worth fixing a typo, but on page 58, where it says program 3A, it says the sites to be made available at rents affordable to households earning less and 80%. I'm sure it's supposed to be less than 80%, but I mean, I don't know how important it is to fix a typo, but that's the end of my questions.
Are there any other questions by members of the council? If not, we will open it to public questions regarding either of the 2 items that have been reported on by Andrew. Is there any member of the public in the building who wishes to address us with respect to either of these items?
Good evening. It's not a question, it's more a statement. I really want to thank, as a resident of the town of Ross, the consulting group, and each of you who've put a lot of time and effort into the housing element for Ross. Housing is an important issue. We need more housing in the county, and I'm really very proud of the work you've done. So thank you so much.
Is there anyone else in the chambers who would like to address the council regarding either of these two items? I see none. Is there any member on Zoom who wishes to address us on this subject?
There are no raised hands on Zoom.
Okay. In that event, I'll bring it back to the council for action. Does anyone have any discussion they wish to present, any comments they wish to present regarding either of these items?
Just a comment to thank our consultants for their help through this remarkable process. Thank you.
I wanted to say the same. I think we really did a great job selecting you, and staff did such a great job of making this work really as smoothly as it could. So thank you.
Yeah, I agree, Andrew. I think if you counted up all of your meetings, it would be in the triple digits, right? So thank you so much. And I think, Christy, you did a great job interviewing and selecting Andrew and his firm. And Rebecca, you did a great job managing the whole process. So thank you.
Does any other member of the council have any comments regarding either of these items?
I'll move to certify the final EIR impact report and approve the amendments to the Town Ross General Plan to adopt a new housing element.
I'll second.
Let's do them separately.
Thank you, Mayor.
Okay, I'm going to break my motion up. First, I'll move to certify the final EIR.
Second.
Councilmember McMillan?
Aye.
Councilmember Kircher?
Aye.
Councilmember Robbins?
Aye.
Mayor Cool?
Aye.
Councilmember Breckus?
Aye.
Thank you. With a vote of 5, the motion passes.
Do you have some other motion?
I do. Yes. Next, I'm going to move to approve the amendments to the Town of Ross General Plan to adopt a new housing element.
Second.
Councilmember McMillan?
Aye.
Councilmember Kircher?
Aye.
Councilmember Robbins?
Aye.
Mayor Cool?
Aye.
Councilmember Breckus?
Aye.
Thank you. With a vote of 5, motion passes.
Yes.
It's been a long process. Our next item on the agenda is next steps and wrap up. Can you advise us what the next steps will be?
Yes, so we will post the revised housing element now adopted with any further revisions, clarifications on the town website. It'll be up for 7 days. And then we will send the adopted housing element to HCD for their further review and for certification. And as I mentioned, we'll send it in redline version together with that line-by-line matrix that explains how their comments have been addressed.
Does anyone else, Julie, you have a comment?
I just have a question. How long do you think they're going to keep it? And are they going to make more comments? And are we going to be back here revising, or is this it?
So they have 60 days to review an adopted housing element. I think that we know our reviewer. We will follow up proactively. My guess is they may have some further question or they want some further clarification. We'll probably hear from them in about a month's time. We'll have some formal meetings, and the way the process is run in other communities is they will provide a final HCD will provide a final punch list of things that we will continue to work through with HCD, sort of informally until they have agreed that they're ready to certify. Then we'll bring, if there's any further additions or changes, we'll bring them back to the council. They may be minor, which wouldn't, if they're non-substantive. I believe the resolution says that they don't need to come back to the council. If there's anything substantive, then we would bring it back to the council.
Does anyone else on the council have any questions or comments about next steps and wrap up? If not, is there any member of the public who has a comment with respect to next steps and wrap up? Yes, sir. You need to, you need to come up here.
Yeah, Singberg. Only question I have is, I thought our state wanted us to have about 100 plus ADUs. How many do we have at the present time? And are we going to be able to meet the state requirements?
Who wants to address that?
I think the question was, how many ADUs do we have currently in the town of Ross? I don't have that data, but if I can do some math from the 2018 to now, sort of annual housing progress reports, I think we're somewhere in the ballpark of 25 or 30. Does that sound right?
And we,
On my memory.
and we established that we were adding approximately 10 per year. Is that right?
Yes.
Okay. Anyone else in the public want to make any comments about the next steps and wrap up? Anyone on Zoom wish to make any comments?
We have no raised hands on Zoom.
Okay. That being the case, I believe we're ripe for adjournment. Thank you all very much.